favorite story that you could reply also.
He doesn't just give a shot. He goes.
All right, so we're going to take up the next point, but let's just to review the last point in the Gemara to segue into this Gemara. Okay, the last point we said was that. What was the last point? So just forget going through the whole shock of the Torah. The last point was that what's the well, I did it already. What's the mitzvah? What's the Kriyas Megillah? So there's really two components to it, right? There's the Maisa Kriya, right? There's the Maisa, the act of reading, and then there's the Pirsum effect. In other words, it produces a certain type of Pirsum. And how's that manifest? Because the people will ask about the story. All right. With that point in mind, now we have to go to the Gemara, Mishnah and Gemara on Chesam Beis and Megillah.
How long is the shock of the Torah?
So the Mishnah is on Chesam Avram Shlomo. The Mishnah is on Chesam Beis on the bottom. All right. Ein bein svarim l'tfilim mezuzos. Go.
Yeah. Ein bein svarim l'tfilim mezuzos. There's no difference between svarim and tefillah and mezuzos.
Svarim. No, svarim with tefillim mezuzos. In other words, on the one end you have svarim, on the other end you have tefillim mezuzos. Svarim meaning Tanakh, Sifrei Torah, and the Nevi'im Ksuvim, right? Written on cloth. Right. Okay. All right. And in Ashuras. So Sifrei Torah can be written in any language, right? But Tefillah Mezuzos can only be written in Ashuras. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer. So what's he saying?
You can only write it in Greek.
The Sifrei Torah. Yeah. So the machlokes between Tanna Kama and Rav Shimon Gamliel, or Rabbanan and Rav Shimon Gamliel, is when it comes to Sifrei Torah, can it be written in any language or just in Yavanis? Tefillah Mezuzos is just Ashuras. The Gemara is going to explain why. Okay. All right. Take out the Gemara or Minu.
Or Minu. Contradiction from Brisa. Mikra shekasu targum. Targum shekasu mikra.
Uksav Ivri.
Eino metame es hayadayim. Ashi echvenu b'chsav ashuri sal sefer.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Right. So if you write Torah, except for Torah in Targum.
Right. So just quickly, Rashi says Mikra shekasu Targum, Sefer shekasu b'lashon hakodesh, right? Haroi lichtav bo Mikra, right? That meaning what? Meaning that should be written in Hebrew, right? Kasov lashon Arami.
Yeah.
So he wrote it in Aramaic, right? And then what's the other case? V'tirgum Rashi says Shahaya Roy Lichtavo Tirgum Kagon Yigar Sahadusa. So now we're getting a little more specific here. In other words, it's not the whole Sefer Torah. Of course, that's what you guys thought. But what's it referring to? What's Yigar Sahadusa?
Aramaic word.
At the end of what? Vayishlach. At the end of the story there. No, not Vayishlach. Wrong. Vayetze. At the end of the parsha of Vayetze, what happens? So Lavan's chasing after Yaakov, right? And then they decide to make some sort of peace treaty. So the Torah says, "Vayikach Yaakov Aven Vayirem Matzeva," right? Vayom Yaakov lechav liktu avanim vaychuvani ma'asugal vayochu sham alagal vayikra lo Lavan Yigar Sahadusa v'Yaakov Karalo Galed. All right. So now in our Sifrei Torah we have Yigar Sahadusa and we have Galed. Yigar Sahadusa is what language?
Aramaic. Right.
Well, not Hebrew for sure. Right. And Galed is the Hebrew of Yigar Sahadusa. You understand? In other words, the same location, two different languages. Okay. So the guy comes along. He's writing the Sefer. That's what it means by the Aramis, the Tirgum to Mikra, meaning that it's Roy Lichtabo Tirgum Kagon Yigar Sahadusa. But what does he do? Kaso Mikra Galed. All right. Now give me another example of that. The Rashi says, what's the other example? Ukagon Tirgum Ksav Shel Daniel Ezra. So what would be another example of that? A guy sits down. What language is Ezra and Daniel written in? For the most part. Aramaic. So what does the guy do?
He writes in Hebrew.
Right. Okay. So that's the issue. Notice he's taking So there is a real idea of a sefer being written in Aramaic. Ezra and Daniel.
Oh, is it really?
And what's Uksav Ivri? So Rashi says, "Oh Shaloshinas Alashon, or Aval Shinas Ksav." Right now, by the way, Mati, that's why I kept insisting on how the Gemara is supposed to be read. In other words, what's Ksav Ivri? Ksav Ivri is you didn't change the language, but rather you changed it from the Ashur's script to some other type of script. Okay, Shekasu B'Ksav Shel Ivri Hanar. Okay, fine. So now the Gemara says Ad.
Right,
Rashi says, what's Ashuris? Ksav Ashuris, he Ksav Shalanus, that's our Ksav. So our script is Ashuris.
What do you mean every time it's time?
When you sew the cloth.
Hi, Rabbi Art School. Right. So there's an idea that the Chazal came along and Misakin. That certain there's a whole history of the reason why. It's not for our shir, but there's certain the way you differentiate Sifrei Kodesh or Kisvei Kodesh from other Svarim is if they're Metames Yadayim. Right. The halachic implications are irrelevant. However, what you have to keep in mind is that if the difference between a Sefer Torah and a Chumash. A Sefer Torah is Metames Yadayim. A Chumash, you get Chamisha Chumshei Torah written on cloth, okay, Indio, but let's say you don't have the right kavan or whatever.
That way
you're not writing for Sefer Torah, so that's what's come out today. But that's I'm not getting to that issue now. So what do you call it? So the point is that would be considered. That's still considered a sefer. You have to treat it respectfully, right? For instance, it would require gniza if the Shem Hashem is there, but it's not Metames Yadayim. It's not Metames Yadayim. So what's the indication here? Metames Yadayim is doing what?
It's showing you like a higher level of kedusha.
Okay, good. So it's showing you something greater about this thing. Okay? Okay. So now, so what's the stira? What's the kasha in the Gemara? Sometimes you have a brisa against the Mishnah. The brisa seems to say you can only write it in Ksav Ashuris, and the Mishnah says you can, according to Tanakama, you can write it in any language. So what's the first answer? So Amarava. Q.
Yeah. Amarava Lokasha. Time issue. Kan begufin shalanu. Kan begufin shalahan.
All right. So what does that mean?
Rashi kan begufin shalanu.
Ksiva. Guvan ksiva. The guva means ksiva. Means script. Okay.
Okay, fine. So Masnisin did
Kitani b'chol lashon.
Yeah, b'chol lashon shaloshina as aksav ela shashina as halashon. Ubraisa begufin shalahan.
Right. So the Mishnah is saying what? The Mishnah is saying that as long as you keep the script, it's still considered okay.
Yeah.
But the Brisa is talking about what'd you do? You change the script. Right? So that would resolve the stira. It's not a stira. It's that you can write it in any other language. You can write it in any other language as long as what? You retain the script. Right, you retain the script assurus. Okay? Okay, fine. But now the Gemara says not so fast.
What did you just explain?
B'gufan shalahen.
My I read Mikra Shekisvo Targum, the Targum Shekisvo Mikra. I feel a Mikra Shekisvo Mikra. The Targum Shekisvo Targum. Nami Dahagatani.
Achi Kasvan Ashuris, I'll say for video. What's his kasha? So Abai says this is a bad answer. Why? We're not defining this. Just want to get this out of the way. Why is it a bad answer?
Because the assurance is the defining factor.
Who cares if it's Mikra or Targum? The issue is the script, not the language. That's the point. The issue is the script. So what is the Brisa? Why would the Brisa talk about changing languages if it's irrelevant? The essential point is that you didn't write in the right script.
I didn't even answer.
Where is it? Ella lo kasha. Harabanan.
So that's an easy way to answer it, right? Why?
Because Rabbanan.
Well, who's who?
Rabbanan say is Rabbanan Tanakama?
Rabbanan Tanakama.
Yeah, so they say you can write it in English. Leah only says you can write it in Greek.
Oh, but one second. But then how would you read then who's the Brisa according to? Rosh Gamliel, right? The limiting position. Okay. Oh, a second. So why was that? Oh, you missed your cue. No, now you can't answer it now. So Ella.
I already said it, so it potentially exists.
Ella lokasha kan visvarim.
No. Ha ika yavanis. But you got a problem. Why can't you learn the answer that way? Because. Rosh Hashanah, you have a question? Yeah. Where it says why is it that you can only write tefillah mezuzos and ashuris? So the Gemara says
right, and they were
vayu hadvarim ha'ela, right?
Yeah, they're just things. Yehu.
In other words, it should be like what? These words. In other words, the way the Torah was written, the way tefillah mezuzah, I mean, the way it's written in the Torah, that's what has to be written. That exact format must be written in tefillah mezuzos. Okay, let's keep going.
Targum Shekisvu Mikra.
Oh, well, yeah. So what about that case? The Gemara asks, what about Mikra to Targum? But you have a case.
Ika Bishlama Torah. Ika Yagasha Hadasa.
So you have both. You have both cases, right? Because by Aramaic you have Yagar Sadusa.
Yeah. Ella Hacha my Targum.
Yeah, but you have a problem though. But what do you have that's Tirgum that you would write in Hebrew in the Torah? You don't have anything. Okay, so Gemara says no. So Elo Okasha. Okay, that's the main answer. So what's the final conclusion of the Gemara?
The Mishnah talking about Megilla.
Mishnah's talking about Svarim, and the Brisa is talking about. So right now at this point in time, what is the Gemara's conclusion about Megillah at this junction?
can't be about
What?
only being assurance.
It has to be yours.
Has to be assurance. Now, why is that a problem?
It's contrary.
We know you're in school.
Forget Yavanis.
We have a Mishnah.
We forget we're not a Mishnah. We have a Gemara. The Gemara says openly in Chesaman Aleph that's what do you call that? You can read it in any language as long as
You did it any?
As long
it can be written and read in any language.
understand
As long as
Nigger.
well, what do you mean Nicker? Makirimbo, as long as nice try. As long as there are people there who speak that language. Oh, now go to Tosfos. Slowly.
Alright.
There's a beautiful svara. Go through. There's a beautiful svara here. Let's see if you guys can work it out.
At this juncture,
Okay. Come on, Megilla and Megillah. So later on, we derive that it's talking about Megillah.
Meaning what? That's why you have to go through the Gemara. Meaning what? What's Lakaman is referring to?
It has to be Ashurius and Sefer. And
What's the Lakaman is referring to? The Maskana, meaning that Kan be Megillah, Kan be Sefer, right? So he's saying that the end of the Gemara tells you what? That there's a limitation in what you can write in Megillah, and it's only in. So Tosfos says. So Tosfos says we know from the Gemara's conclusion. It's clear that what? That there's a restriction in Megillah being translated. It can only. It seems like from the Gemara's conclusion that Megillah can only be done in Hebrew with Ksav Ashuris, meaning Hebrew and Hebrew Ksav. And that's it. That's all you can do. Oh.
Vikasha. Tahamir Parashani. Giftis like giftim. Alimas alimim.
Yatsa.
Yatsa.
So that's why I made you guys do that Gemara. But
Yeah.
we see from the other Gemara that it's clear that I can do it in any language.
Maybe
Right.
wrote it in a shirt.
What?
Maybe wrote it in a shirt.
Who's he?
I'm saying maybe it was written in a shirt.
No, it wasn't. It's written in Giftis.
why did you
No,
say here?
then you can write. No, then you can write.
Vadai shekasu rose alashon shekora.
Oh, so now you don't try and say. Well, Tosfos is being very careful. Don't try and tell me that the Megillah, the Spanish Megillah, wasn't written in Spanish. Why? Because if it was written in, let's say, Hebrew, and I'm translating it to Spanish, what's that a problem in?
Right.
What's that a problem in? Oh, right, Koral Peh. Because what am I doing? I'm reading it in language A and translating it into language B. Right? My vocalization of the reading is one of Al Peh. Right?
Have a koral peh. Like that.
Right.
Below yatsa.
V'lo yatsa.
Ni'im king. Kasha.
Oh, 1 second. So everyone clear about that?
No.
Okay, again, so he said this. You got to. Every move has to be understood, so you can understand what his svara is. Okay, he's saying something amazing. He's saying, factually, but he's saying like this. He's saying, should I board?
No.
Okay, he's saying this. He's saying that we have a problem. We have a stira because this brisa seems to say that you can only do it in Ashuras, but the other brisa says you can do it in any language. And you can't tell me when we say you can do it in a language. Don't think that means that it was written in Spanish but read in a different language. That's Koral Peh. That can't be.
Written in Spanish? No, written in...
No, written in Hebrew and said in Spanish. That can't be. Or written in Spanish and said in Portuguese. Point is,
Because that would be...
Koral Peh. You're reading it. You're not reading it from the source. You're just saying it out loud.
We define source,
Yes,
please.
it's written in Spanish, and I'm saying it. I'm reading it, but when I read it, what's coming out of my mouth is Portuguese. It's the Portuguese translation of the Spanish
The
Megillah.
transliteration in Spanish of Portuguese.
I am
That's what
translating. If you speak Russian and I speak Hebrew,
Yes.
right, and I read my Megillah, and it
It's written
says
in what
my Megillah says by Hivi Achashverosh in Hebrew,
What script is it written in?
Hebrew,
And it's transliterated into what?
Hebrew,
Oh.
and I'm reading it in Niet. That's a problem. You hear Niet, and I'm reading.
So, it's a misnomer.
But if that's true on my
Ni'im king.
Kasha, right?
I lomitame es hayadayim. Kemesh nidal lekros. Lifta b'chol Hashem. Shemakirim ba.
What's his kasha? What's his kasha?
If this is a kasha Megillah, then it should be the time you're in.
Right. So he built up a good case for himself. He's saying, listen, if you're going to tell me that you can use this Megillah, that writing in Spanish, and read, if it's written in Spanish and read to a Spanish audience, that you're Yotze, so why would that not be Matamas Yadayim? Well, but we know it's not. There's only one Megillah that's Matamas Yadayim. Ashuris. Only, in other words, whatever, forgetting, without avoiding the halachas of Matamas Yadayim, whatever that differentiated status of Matamas Yadayim is, it only applies to what?
Written in insurance.
Written Ashuris, right? So he wants to know why. Because every time you're Yotze through a Megillah written in any language, so why would you have this differentiation by Ashuris that only that one's Matamas Yadayim? Okay? And don't give me a spiritual answer. So what's Tosfos say?
Yesh lomar v'keven she'eino kshira likros ela limakirim ba. Right? Dinu.
Shalo.
Titame.
Titame.
As Hayadayim.
So Tosfos says, since it's not kosher to read the Spanish Megillah only for what kind of people? Spanish-speaking people. That's why it's not Metamis Yadayim. Aval Heicha. What?
Didn't it was Kal V'chomer or no?
One second. No, it's not Kal V'chomer. He's just saying that's the din. It's not. But Aval Heicha Diksiva Shuris Kshera Af L'She'ena Makirin. Right? But by Hebrew, does it matter if I understand the language or not? It's universal, right? I could speak Russian. I only understand Russian, but if I come in and hear Megillah in Hebrew, I'm Yotzei, since that exists by Ashuris, therefore...
It just be written. You have to hear it in Hebrew?
If I hear Megillah read in Hebrew, no matter what language, if I don't understand Hebrew at all, I'm still Yotzei Megillah. So I only understand Spanish, and I hear it in Hebrew, I'm Yotzei. So since that exists by Ashuris, right? Afish Eina Makirin, Mishum Hachi Dinhu, therefore the din must be Shed Tamas Yadayim. Okay? So what the heck is Tosfos talking about? In other words,
I see a couple scratches.
Tosfos says if it's a Spanish Megillah,
What does that mean?
if it's a Megillah written in Spanish, it's not Metamas Yadayim. Why? Because it's only for which people? It's only for Spanish-speaking people. But if it's
What kind of racist statement is that?
again, a Megillah that's written in Spanish is not Metamas Yadayim, since it's limited to only what people?
Spanish.
Spanish-speaking people.
Spaniards.
People understand Spanish forever.
A Russian crowd. Oh my god.
Then it wouldn't work.
Right. So it's dependent on the people actually being Spanish.
Right, but the point though, he's saying that's why the qualification of Metamas Yadayim doesn't apply. But in a case where it's Ashuris, right? It's always Matame. It's Matame. Why? Because Ashuris works for everyone. It doesn't matter. It didn't say Lashon HaKodesh. It doesn't matter if it's irrelevant if people understand it or not. They're always Yotzei. So that's why it's Matame Yadayim. So there's two questions you must ask on Tosfos. What are the two questions?
Why the hell?
Why the heck is that so?
Why is it different?
Well, and he's very nice. He's very nice. He's saying this. Right? It's great, right? But what's the svara? I mean, you can't just say that. But there's another question. What's the other question? Well, I think it should be the same. No, Mati's got the other question, which is the more sophisticated question, which of course a boor like you would never know.
Don't say it.
It should be the same by Sefer Torah.
Well, 1 second. Sefer Torah.
What?
Sefer Torah.
Megillah.
What's all about Sefer Torah?
Yeah, it's Korea. It's still Korea.
More than that.
It's Matami in your hands by Spanish.
It's always Metamas Yadayim. We don't pass in that way.
Any other language?
Because we pass like Moshe Megillah. Any other language, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter if it's a Spanish, Portuguese, Russian. It's always Metamas Yadayim.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Why?
Why? God's mouth.
You're open for them.
Kiksavam, meaning how it's written, and Kilshonam in
Okay,
that language. Okay. Let's take the first step. The first step is really addressing your question. Your question is really the first step. Okay. The question is how do you differentiate Sefer Torah from Megillah? Both of them are able to be translated, but one is limited, meaning it's only there for those who understand it, whereas by Sefer Torah the translations are equal. Okay. Now, as the one point Ravi said perfectly, which I agree with, is that there's the Kriya of a Sefer Torah and the Kriya Megillah, which we established last time, have two completely different objectives. Kriya of the Torah is there to transmit ideas. All right, it's limud. Okay, and in fact, I'll prove it to you. In other words, by limud, we don't care so much about like the fact. We recognize there's going to be something lost in translation in the literal words, but at the same time, what's the objective? The objective is the ideas contained within it. So, for example, if you read the pasuk says "Mechashefa lo sechayeh" by Mishpatim, okay, without Torah Shebal Peh, where are we? Nowhere. Mechashefa lo sechayeh, like a sorceress can't be kept; she has to be killed. But you need Torah Shebal Peh to explain to you what that means. So, the point though is that, but what's the objective of Megillah? The objective of Megillah is what? Well, okay, but you're telling over a story. Okay, so there's one is transmission of ideas and one transmission of a story. Now, let me show you categorically how I viewed it, and then how the svara will emerge. Okay, think about it. If you do you understand that point?
Side point about the machshava thing.
No. So if you what do you call it? No, I'm going to roll here. You got it afterwards. Okay. Now think about it. Think about this. In the Sefer Torah, what's the difference between saying that a Sefer Torah can be just logically? Okay. A Sefer Torah being translated to any language without consequence versus without any limitation versus saying that a Megillah can be translated to other languages, but only if there's a limitation there, which is that it can only be if it's understood by those people. So what's it telling you about the nature of the translative process, so to speak? What's the difference between the Sefer Torah translation and the Megillah translation? You were hinting to this when you were giving over your svar analogy. Let's say President Knight is speaking, and at the press conference, all the reporters are there from different countries. Right now, they don't understand Obama. So what does he do? He recites his press conference, right, in every other language. Okay? So every time he's reciting the press conference, when he goes from English to Spanish to Portuguese to Russian, what's he doing?
Same press conference.
Right, it's just duplicating, it's just a facsimile, it's a photocopy of that press conference. And there's no difference there. You understand? If he's giving a press conference over and he gives it over in 5 different languages, is there any difference in the press conferences? No. That's like Sefer Torah. But what if Obama gave a press conference over, right, and then all the reporters had to use translators to now take what he said and put it into their language? So all the reporters are doing what when they translate it? They're doing what? Right, which means it's a little more sophisticated. It's a referential translation. You're referencing back to the original source. You're not.
How does it you do?
Words like this. By Sefer Torah is set up in a way where, again, the objective being transmission of ideas. Sefer Torah was set up, the concept of transmission of ideas is expressed in the very way, in the very method of translation, meaning that it doesn't matter what language it's translated to, it's always copying the exact same thing. There's no difference, forget the Kedusha of Lashon HaKodesh. There's no real difference between Spanish, Ashuris, and Portuguese. It's all the same thing. But by Megillah was set up differently. We'll have to get into why soon. But Megillah was set up where, what's Megillah? Megillah is the source, because it's a story. So because it's a story, you want to always retain authenticity. So the language, the language the story was told in, is the part of the very story itself. The language the story was told in and written in is part of the story. So therefore, everything that comes out, every time you translate another language, what are you doing? You're translating that story. You're translating the story of Megillah into another language. You're not copying it. It's a translation of a source. So Megillah is the source of all other languages. There's a huge conceptual difference between that. And then I'll show you how halacha expresses that. But that's the next step I would take. You will see why by Megillah there is a difference. Right. Dylan comes up with a good question. So Dylan's saying, 1 second, if that's true, then why have a matir altogether to read another language, right?
Oh, why?
The Chazal do this a lot when they create like these types of abundance. Chazal are facing a tension. Okay, there's a big tension here. What's a tension? On the one hand, they want to retain the most authentic version of the retelling of the story. But what do you mean? A feature of you just sit down and listen, okay? Fine. A feature of the very telling of the story is the language it was told in. That's a feature in telling of the story. All right. So on the one hand, they want to retain that, but on the other hand, you have a problem because, as we said before, what's the objective of the kriya halachically? It must be a kriya shell. What? What's him halachically? What is it? It's a kriya pirsum. So the problem is, what problem are you going to run into? Is that if you only limit it to Ashuris, what's going to happen?
I understand.
No, more than that. What's going to happen? A significant percentage of the population won't understand it at all. So that's the tension they're facing. So what's the solution? The solution is a beautiful solution, right? Rather than they're not picking a side, they're saying you're right. We must allow. You'll see tomorrow on Sunday why this is true. But we must allow the Megillah to be translated in other languages because we need to maximize Pirsum. But we have to differentiate the Kriya of the Megillah Ashuris so that everybody knows that is the most authentic version. Okay? Now, how's that expressed halachically? Wait, do you understand that point? In other words, you understand what I just said? No. Again, points like this. In other words, Chazal are facing a certain tension. Okay? On the one hand, there's one idea in Pirsum is that the story is told in its authentic form, right? Which is a feature of the telling of the story is the language it was written in. But on the other hand, the objective of this whole mitzvah is to do what? It's to maximize the message, to maximize it to as many people as possible. And if you limit to Ashuris, what's going to happen? You're going to have lots of people who don't understand it. So to resolve that tension, what do? They say like this. They say, okay, we're going to allow it to be written in other languages, right? And it can only be read when? In those other languages? Where they understand it. And this way, and then we're going to ensure that Ashuris retains its superiority. Right. So it's not
it's not Kriya. It's not a Kriya.
No. You just made the move. Here's the move now. So the Megillah in Ashuris is what? It's a what?
Just a Kriya.
No, Megillah. No, what's Megillah Shal Ashuris?
It's a Megillah.
They're all Maisa Kriyas.
They're not all my.
Kriya-
But only one has what?
Piercing.
Only one is a.
Megillah.
What do you mean by that?
Chris the Torah.
It's a what? It's a chefsa shel pirsum. Only Megillah Ashuris is a chefsa shel pirsum. Every one of them. Get this point. Every time you read Megillah, no matter what the language is, you're doing a Maisa Kriya. You do a Maisa Kriya. You make a bracha if you do it on the Spanish Megillah. It's a Maisa Kriya. But what's it lacking? It's not a chefsa shel pirsum. Only the Ashuris is a chefsa shel pirsum, and that's Matamas Yadayim.
Because everything else.
That's why even if you don't understand Ashuris, but you're reading from a chefsa shel pirsum, you're reading from the chefsa shel pirsum. So only the Megillah Ashuris is the definition of a chefsa shel pirsum. That's what Chazal did.
I don't understand the chefsa.
Only one Megillah. There's no. I'll put it in a different way. In other words, only one type of Megillah is infused, so to speak, with the status of being the Megillah. Okay, that's a Megillah shel Ashuris. So even though all you can do, as long as you do an action of reading Megillah from any language is fine, because you're doing it an action of reading. But only one type of Megillah is infused with the quality of being an object of Pirsumei Nisa. And that's the Megillah Shal Ashuris. That's why, even if you don't understand it, you're Yotzei.